Hey, good afternoon to you. 406 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up in the next hour, 5:30, Brad Devlin will be with us. Bradley Devlin will be with us from the American Conservative. We talked to him about Speaker Mike Johnson's very perilous month of April. He's got to navigate a lot of stuff and not screw it up. How will he do? We'll talk to Bradley Devlin about that. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. School's out forever. The headline, Karol Markowicz, school's out forever as education bosses use any excuse to skip class. For more on this, let's bring her in. Karol Markowicz is here. She's a New York Post columnist and a host of the Karol Markowicz Show. Karol, great to talk to you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
What is happening in the United States of America when it comes to attendance among school students? Here in Washington, D.C., every so often we get these headlines that truancy is still out of control. There's a lot of kids aren't showing up to school. They're not showing up to school. And it turns out when they're not at school, they're doing stuff that's making the community a lot less safe. So what's happening?
Right. So what happened was that during the pandemic, the teachers' unions tried to keep schools closed for as long as possible. And parents and kids got the message that school is really not essential. And it's very hard to kind of get that genie back in the bottle. It's not easy to say to them, no, we didn't mean it. You do have to go to school, actually. It is kind of a big deal. And so what we're facing right now is schools closed for just about any reason. Plenty of schools were closed yesterday for the eclipse. And the thinking was, it was to keep the kids safe so that they wouldn't look at the sun. Well, kids can look at the sun when there's no eclipse, too. Maybe we shouldn't let them leave their closet, but we do for some reason anyway.
Yeah.
So we've gotten to where it's just they come up with reasons. They pretend it's for their own good, or in places like New York, for example, when they had an influx of migrants who they had nowhere else to put them, they closed the school and put them there for the day, and the kids went to remote learning. Nobody considered, let's put them in the government offices, in the mayor's offices, or in the teachers union building. That they have two huge buildings in Manhattan. Nobody thought, let's put them there. No, let's close the school and stick them there so the kids can just stay home that day.
So what you're saying is like all these schools that shuttered, of course, needlessly during the pandemic, it just conditioned everyone to think that safetyism and that like sort of that panicked fainting goat attitude should be the way that we operate all the time.
That's exactly it. I think that they've been conditioned to accept that schools are just not that important. Education's just not that important. And look, the thing is that this idea was pushed for so long that, it doesn't matter if kids go to school in person. They'll be fine. They'll be okay. Well, it turns out that they're not okay. And not just the truancy rates, not just the absenteeism rates, but the test scores have not come anywhere near bouncing back, which all of this was predictable. None of this is a surprise. I think we could have said even in fall 2020 that this was all going to be an issue for years and years. And in fact, I wrote about it again and again.
Yes.
And it was very hard to get anybody to care. And so I just feel like we're living with the repercussions of that right now. And when people say, this is because of the pandemic, I make it very clear it's not because of the pandemic. It's because of the awful, terrible pandemic-era policies.
Mm-hmm.
It was government officials, politicians who did this, and our society has still not recovered.
And also, it got to the point, it feels like we're schools and the school systems, they've taken the attitude that they're responsible for more than the academic upbringing of the children, that they're responsible for them holistically. And I think the average parent would say no, or at least they used to. They'd say, no, your job is arithmetic, reading, and writing. My job is the rest. The moral upbringing of my child is my responsibility.
Right. Well, if they did any of the, educating on any kind of good level, that would be one thing. But they're spending their time on this social, emotional nonsense. And I think that that's where parents need to be drawing the line. They need to say, my kids, the test scores have shown throughout the whole country that we're in a really bad place. Our public schools are in trouble. Until we can have school choice where parents can opt out of these systems, which is going to be a long time in a lot of places, we need to improve these schools. And one way to improve them is to cut out all the nonsense and focus on academic subjects, period.
What about good teachers? Are good teachers supported, do you think, these days? So, for instance, if you have a student who's acting out in class, and I can't tell you how many videos I've seen of just like ridiculous behavior from students where in the old days, a teacher would be like, just throw them out of the class, maybe even grab them by the ear and yank them out. Nowadays, it seems like you've got to bring in therapists and the student. You have to defer
Right.
to the student. Maybe we can't call mom and dad. There's like this weird sort of we have to allow the bad thing to go on as long as so long that it damages everybody in the classroom. What about the good teachers? Are they
Yeah.
supported?
Well, they're absolutely not, and it drives them out of the profession. I've known so many good teachers and so many that are no longer teaching because they just have had enough. And I completely understand them. And there's no repercussions for bad or dangerous students. And you could see this when they proceed to adulthood. You could see what happens in our streets. You could see the traffic blockers for climate change or for freeing Palestine or whatever the cause of the moment is. No, there are no repercussions for any of these people. They're gluing their hands to paintings, they're destroying artwork, they're knocking down statues of historic figures, and no repercussions whatsoever. Nobody's held accountable. And what I always go back to also about like the pandemic era policies, nobody was held accountable for those. That was a terrible thing to do to children. In particular, the poorest children in the country suffered the most, and absolutely no one has been held accountable or had to apologize or lost an election over it. It's really mind-boggling.
Well, also, it accelerated all these kids into the arms of the most dangerous technology of our generation, which is these computers and smartphones. And at a very young age, all of a sudden, they're spending all their time on these devices. And it turns out that there's a lot of peril there, especially when strangers are attempting to raise your children over the internet.
hmm Well, that's absolutely right. And you could see such a change in how we use technology from before the pandemic to now. Now I live in South Florida. I see people arrive at the beach and hand their kids an iPad on the beach and just be like, here you go. This is how you're spending the day today. Or in restaurants. Like I'm not perfect. I've definitely given one of my kids, if they're melting down at a restaurant, my phone when they were little. But to just have them have it the entire time throughout dinner, which is I see constantly now. So the relationship with technology has really changed, and I
Sure.
think that it's hard to get it's hard to get that genie back in the bottle. It's hard to get back to where we were before because we made so many things okay, which were simply not okay.
Well, it's also present in the classroom. That's the story I keep hearing from teachers is that these smartphones are just destroying these kids, and they're in the classroom,
Right.
holding them, using them, not paying attention,
Crazy.
communicating with each other, jumping all over TikTok, and it's just wrecking whatever chance they have of actually getting a foundation to succeed in life.
Right. So I recently did a fellowship at Hillsdale College in Michigan. Hillsdale is a small Christian college. It's considered the model for a lot of other, institutions. Everybody really has a high regard for Hillsdale, and I really didn't know that much about it. But what was really insane to me and really amazing was that the kids don't use laptops in class. And I was really shocked by this. I mean, there were a lot of other things I thought were shocking and amazing about it also. But the fact that the kids are sitting there and writing by hand in their notebooks was incredible to me. You just knew that none of the kids were watching YouTube videos. None of the kids were texting with their friends while you were teaching them. They were all there, present and focused. And I saw such a difference with them compared to other college kids that I've
Yes.
met, and they're just miles above. And it's such
Well,
a small thing, but it really matters.
also, just while you're on the subject of Hillsdale refuses to accept or to allow
Yep.
students to have any federal funding to attend,
hmm
which is such a huge advantage over so much of
Huge.
higher education because when you take federal funding, the federal government imposes all sorts of restrictions and requirements on the way you conduct your education. Hillsdale says, no, stay out of it. We're going to educate the kids at a high level, and we're not going to allow the federal government to mess that up.
And it really works. These kids are in class. None of them are wearing pajamas, and none of them are wearing jeans. They're all like dressed. They all look you in the eye when they talk to you. The way that all of them shook my hand at the end of it and like said thank you. I came back just so impressed and thinking, this is the path. No technology in class. Period.
So I love it. I love Hillsdale so much. So on the broad issue of these kids, being screwed up by the pandemic era policies, and of course all of our school systems by extension, do you see a better future ahead? Is there a dawning realization about what's going on that's going to lead to better outcomes? Where's this all headed right now?
So I live in Florida. I moved here 2 years ago. I'm one of the pandemic era refugees from New York City. And I do see a better path here. Kids are allowed to have phones, but they're not allowed to have them in class. It's like a whole thing here. And I do see a saner path forward. The fact that Governor DeSantis has managed to kind of get all the peripheral nonsense out of public schools. Doesn't mean I don't worry and I don't check what my kids are learning and all of that. I worry less here, and that's really the first step forward for me. I don't have to worry that some teacher is teaching them some nonsense behind my back. It's simply not allowed, and if they get caught, they get fired. So there's a path to sanity. I think some other states are taking it. Blue areas it's going to be harder and tougher and for a much longer time.
Yeah, but even in what was it, San Francisco, they threw out the whole school board there, and it was lefties who led the effort, and so there is some dawning realization, but it's a tough fight. I mean, look at all of I say it here in this audience, we've got all these Northern Virginia counties where the fights keep going. Fairfax County, Loudoun County, the fights are endless there, and they take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It seems with each passing month, but the fight continues. Karol Markowicz.
Yeah, absolutely. I do see the pendulum swinging in a lot of places. That San Francisco school board thing was huge. The fact that they got to a place where they acknowledge that maybe math isn't racist and maybe they should be teaching algebra to 8th graders, it's a baby step, but it's a step.
Yeah, it's huge. Well, Karol Markowicz, please keep up the great work. New York Post columnist, host of the Karol Markowicz Show. And thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And Karol Markowitz's piece, Schools Out Forever as Education Bosses Use Any Excuse to Skip Class. Any excuse to skip class. It's you can find it on the Fox News website. It's posted there. And she's just great. She's just great, and she's right. And a lot of what I was talking about when I talk about teachers, this is this audience. We get calls all the time from teachers. It's a nightmare with the phones and the school systems and what kids get away with inside of these classrooms. Can't even imagine. And I realize, I don't know, I guess this is always the attitude every generation takes. When I was in school, it was totally different. They would do this. I'm telling you, I mean, when I was, you know this about me by this point, probably. I'm a military brat, so we moved to a lot of different schools when I was a kid. I did the government schools. We were in the Catholic schools. It was just whatever the best school that my parents could get me into and afford at the time. Whatever duty station we were at, that's where they sent me. And I remember going to, where did we live? It was on Long Island. Long Island. We lived there, Nassau County in Long Island, and went to a Catholic school called St. Bridget's. Turns out, I found out years later that Bill O'Reilly also went to that school, but he was much older than I am. And I went there, and I had a nun, Sister Mary Patrick was my teacher. And I will say, I don't know if you can tell nowadays because I'm so put together, but there were times where I would act out in class. And she had a paddle. Corporal punishment was still a thing. And it came out. I think it struck my desk. It didn't quite get to striking me, but it was enough. It brought me back to my senses. I don't think that's happening these days. And by the way, my parents were rooting it on at the time. They were on her side. They were like, hell yeah, bring out the paddle. Why didn't you go further? They were concerned that she didn't take it far enough. Nowadays, it's like that's lawsuits waiting to happen, especially in this area. So many lawyers. Everyone's like scared of everything. Let the kid do whatever he wants. No, that's idiocy. It's 420. Anybody else glad that the solar eclipse is over? I told my daughter yesterday, I'm like, yeah, 20 years from now, that'll be the next time we do this. 20 years to her, that's like 1,000 years. She can't believe it's going to be that long. I said, don't worry, that'll go quick. Before you know it, blink of an eye, we'll be back to the next solar eclipse for you. But the media went nuts yesterday. You're the lady on the Weather Channel? There's a woman on the Weather Channel. They had a broadcast. This woman was staring at the sun, and this is practically pornographic, her reaction to the eclipse.
Darkness! 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Totality, we're in it, and we're behind a cloud. But I still want you to appreciate the darkness that we are experiencing. And by the way, our temperature has dropped. We're down to 72 degrees. I can even see a blue spot right there. Come on. We've got 4 minutes. The crowd is willing it. Yes! Whoa! We can see it. Just for a minute, just for a second. But I'll take it. I will take it. Look at it. Oh my God. We got it. We got it.
What happened to her, man? You know how some people are seasonally affected by a lack of sunlight? Is there something going on? Like that woman needs sun to be sane or something? She became like a full-blown werewolf in the middle of that solar eclipse. Look at it! Look at it! Just like, hey, lady, you're still on the air. You know, you're on literally a reporter on the Weather Channel. Maybe it's weather people. Maybe it's... All due respect to the weather people. Al Roker was going nuts in Dallas.
Oh, my God. Almost, Lester. There it goes. Yeah.
I think that child is in pain in the background. Somebody should attend to her.
Oh. Yeah. There are the beads. There are the beads.
Could you imagine if any of these people went to church? How exciting that would be, you know? They're like losing it. The moon is blocking the sun.
We saw. Oh, look at this! Look at this! Whoa! Yeah! Oh, look at that! We've got our glasses off right now, Lester. Looking at the umbra, and it is just amazing. Oh, look, we can see Venus. We can see Venus over there.
That's what happens when Al Roker sees an umbra and he sees Venus. He goes crazy. Man, that guy's really had a storied life. He pooped his pants at the White House and he saw an umbra. What an amazing life. Coming up, got some details for you. There's a lot of conversation about what's going on in Arizona right now. Lies immediately about it too, involving the issue of killing unborn children and what role that might play in the election. Also, an NPR insider reveals all about how they're nothing but a bunch of hack activists. The details ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. 4:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up in the next hour, we've got Bradley Devlin joining us at 5 o'clock. From the American Conservative, we'll talk about the job Speaker Mike Johnson has ahead of him, as well as Congress. Funding for Ukraine, fixing the border. Are they going to renew warrantless surveillance of Americans? What's the plan? Are they ever going to send those articles of impeachment for Alejandro Mayorkas to the Senate? When are they going to do that? We've got a lot of questions. Bradley Devlin here in the next hour. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The left is so pumped today. They're so excited. Abortion on the menu. They're pumped about it. There's a lot of headlines coming out. Some of them are outright lies. Like the Washington Post has a headline up right now. It says, Arizona Supreme Court issues near total ban on abortion. That is false, just to be crystal clear about what's happening here. The Arizona Supreme Court did not issue a ban on abortion. They said that a law dating back to 1864 in Arizona is enforceable. They didn't issue a ban. They just acknowledged a law exists. Here's what's going on. New York Times headline, closer to correct here. Arizona upholds 160-year-old abortion ban. Arizona's highest court on Tuesday upheld an 1864 law that bans nearly all abortions, a decision that could have far-reaching consequences for, the New York Times refers to this as women's health care. That's a lie. And election year politics in a critical battleground state. The 1864 law, the court said in a 4-2 decision, is now enforceable, they say. But the court put its ruling on hold for the moment, sent the matter back to a lower court to hear additional arguments about the law's constitutionality. The Arizona Supreme Court said that because the federal right to abortion in Roe v. Wade had been overturned, once again, that's also a lie. There was no right. The court concluded that that was incorrectly applied, this idea that there's a right to kill the kids. They said this is a matter for the states, not for the Supreme Court to decide. There was no federal or state law preventing Arizona from enforcing the near total ban on abortions, which had sat dormant for decades. Got it? So this is a law that dates back to 1864. It's on the books. And because of Roe v. Wade, it basically had become defunct. It wasn't enforced. And as a result of Roe v. Wade being overturned, well, it's a law. And if you don't like it, change the law. The ruling could prompt clinics in Arizona to stop providing abortions, the Times says, and women to travel to nearby states like California, New Mexico, or Colorado to end their pregnancies. Until now, that's a euphemism. Until now, the procedure has been legal in Arizona through 15 weeks of pregnancy. The ruling concerned a law that was on the books long before Arizona achieved statehood. It outlaws abortion from the moment of conception, except when necessary to save the life of the mother. Doctors prosecuted under the law could face fines and prison terms of 2 to 5 years, they say. So that's the state of play right now. Now, rather quickly, a couple things have happened. The Arizona Attorney General, newly elected, is a Democrat and has already declared that she will not be enforcing the law. I don't care what the law is. I'm not enforcing it. Well, sorry, hon. You're supposed to enforce the laws on the books. It's not really, political preference here. You got to enforce the laws as they exist. And if you don't like it, again, change it. Change it. Additionally, Kari Lake, running for Senate in Arizona, she came out against the Arizona Supreme Court ruling in just this afternoon, 2 hours ago. I oppose today's ruling, she said in a statement, and I am calling on Democrat Governor Katie Hobbs and the state legislature to come up with an immediate common sense solution that Arizonans can support, Kari Lake said in a statement. Axios points out that Lake said back in 2022 that the near total ban that the ruling upholds is a, quote, great law, and said it sets an example for other states. Now, remember, earlier this week, Donald Trump came out and said that this is a question for the states and that they should resolve this. Trump is looking to defang the abortion issue going into the election because he, honestly, he doesn't want to use this as a way to charge up Democrats. But here's where some of this is backfiring and could backfire. Let's just contemplate the effects of all of this. Conservatives who have been supportive of Trump this week, who said, let's just kick this to the states. There's no role for the federal government here. Although, of course, there is a role in defunding Planned Parenthood. There's a role in stopping all of these abortions that federal taxpayers are paying for against their will. That's a federal government role for sure. I don't even know why. That's not even up for debate. That should obviously be ended. But conservatives have comforted themselves by saying, look, this is a constitutional question. These types of big questions, these are for the states. The federal government shouldn't have any role in this. And I get that. But think about this from the pragmatic side. What is the effect? Well, Arizona, what they intend to do is they intend to make this a ballot initiative this year. So now Democrats are pumped. They are pumped. Pay no attention to the fake misery that they're going to be wielding on national television, on radio today, and on the internet. Oh, this is horrible, they'll say, and their crocodile tears are pouring down their face. The reality is they want to clamp you shut in their jaws. They love this decision today. The Supreme Court in Arizona is saying this law is enforceable. It's on the books. It's from the 1800s, but it is on the books, baby. It's got to be enforced. You don't like it, change the law. And Democrats are salivating about this. They love this because they think it's going to activate their voters to show up to vote this November and have it on the ballot, to push for a constitutional amendment to the Arizona ballot. Listen to this from the New York Times. Democrats who seized on abortion to win campaigns for governor and attorney general in midterm elections 2 years ago condemned the ruling, and said it would galvanize their supporters to push for a state constitutional right to abortion as a ballot initiative in this November's elections. Let's pull the lens out for a moment. Donald Trump is ahead of Joe Biden by about 4.5 points in Arizona right now. He's performing well there. If lefties are going to show up, by and large, at all, it's not going to be because they're super proud of Biden and really think he did a great job and hope he does it again. That's not going to be it. They need something else. And the left has perfected the use of ballot initiatives as a way to drive turnout to help the rest of their candidates on the ballot. That is true every time they put pot on the ballot. All these marijuana initiatives all across the country, they're meant to be turnout initiatives. That's what they're really about. They're trying to drive turnout to the polls so they can get Democrats elected top to bottom all across the ballot. So they throw, let's put a pot referendum on the ballot. People who don't show up that frequently will show up this time. They'll show up now. Make sure the weed supply keeps coming, now legally. And the same is true of abortion. They realize the left, they're very activated. The base of voters. They're very activated by issues that, for most of us, it doesn't touch our daily lives, but they love human sacrifice. They love abortion. They're totally activated by it, and they're totally activated by justifying it. And so the goal here is, let's make it a ballot initiative. That's what Democrats want to do. They want to do it in Virginia. They want to do it in Arizona. They want to do it everywhere, because it is a turnout driver for them from their base in order to get their guy elected. So just as a pragmatic point, by saying, okay, this should be an issue that just is resolved at the state level, well, this is how Democrats want to resolve it. They want to throw this as a ballot initiative over and over and over again. In fact, they may even prize the idea that this is a state issue just to do vote turnout efforts. So this is all developing today and kind of fascinating. But again, if you don't like it, change it. Now, Kari Lake is saying, hey, change the law. She's urging Democrats in Arizona to quickly, go ahead, change the laws right now. Guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to change the law because it's a lie. They're not even, all of this stuff about, oh, we need to take care of women. We need to do it urgently. That's not what this, it's all power play for these people. They're not going to pass anything in Arizona. They're going to make it a ballot initiative. That's what they're going to do. Amend the Constitution because they want permanent power. It's not about any individual law. They're not interested in protecting women. That's all. This is a scam. It's a scam. It's about power. So the all of the news coming out of Arizona today, kind of fascinating. You know, Kari Lake coming out against this thing. The Attorney General in Arizona, Democrats say she's not going to enforce the law. You know, and Democrats there are loving this. Democrats at the national level loving this. They're not horrified. They adore it. They adore it. And so like everything in public policy, like everything when it comes to these political battles, these pictures are more complicated than so many others would have you believe. It's not an easy equation. It's entirely possible. Look, the vast majority of Americans despise late-term abortion. Despise it. The vast majority. All of the polling on this is super clear. It's the earlier days in a child's gestation where people seem to be squishier. There's not quite so much broad agreement. But the later you get into pregnancy, everybody agrees, like, hey, don't kill that kid. So in other words, like, if legislation were passed at a federal level to protect that child, it would have broad support in the American public. It would have very broad support. But Republicans are so weak-kneed, they can barely vocalize these things. Now, Trump, to his credit this week, talked about the extremism of the left and Joe Biden and Ralph Northam, and that is the appropriate tact. Throw it back in their face. There's nothing extreme about you protecting kids. What's extreme is saying that they should be killed up to and including after they're born. That's the Ralph Northam position. Put that back in their face. Nobody's for that. Nobody's for that. And as you're watching demographic shifting all across the country, and you get down to brass tacks and you talk to voters of all backgrounds, races, ethnicities, incomes, what you find is that people are eminently reasonable. And we'll hear that and be like, yeah, I'm on your side, actually. Remember, Trump he destroyed Hillary Clinton on the abortion questions back in 2016. He said she's the extremist, and he laid it out on that debate stage. Are we going to have debates this time? Are we going to have any debates? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. My sense is Trump has said that he's up for it. He really wants to do it. Biden is going to bow out of it. Biden's out there claiming that Trump is the most sincere threat to democracy, that that he's the one that we need to fear. Biden was just telling Spanish language media, Univision, that Donald Trump constitutes the primary threat to freedom and democracy in the entire country. This is the president of the United States saying this about his political opponent, who he's trying to imprison right now.
What, in your view, constitutes the primary threat to freedom and democracy at home?
Donald Trump. Seriously.
Scumbag.
Donald Trump uses phrases like, we're going to eviscerate the Constitution. He's going to be a dictator on day one.
Meanwhile, Joe Biden is literally crapping on the Constitution again today as they keep telling us that they're just going to give away your money to rich kids who don't pay back their student loans. It was Kamala Harris just said in the last 24 hours, regardless of income, we're going to pay off your debts. What? Regardless of what? What party is? Remember the Democrats used to talk about, we got to help the poor, that kind of stuff. They're not even bothering with that anymore. They realize that their base is rich college graduates, especially single female rich college graduates. That's the target. And so now they're out there saying, we don't even care what your income is. We will take from America's poor and middle class and we'll pay off the debts of the upper class because you'll vote for us. That's what we'll do for you. That's how far we're willing to go. Despite the fact the Supreme Court said, don't do that. That's unconstitutional what you're doing. They said, up yours. We're going to do it anyway. It's Joe Biden who has abandoned our sovereignty, kicked open our borders, allowed people to invade it. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's all gaslighting. It's projection. Donald Trump. Yeah, he constitutes the primary threat to freedom and democracy. Donald Trump is not colluding with the social media and the big media companies to censor American citizens. Donald Trump is not locking up his political opponents, didn't lock up his political opponents while he was in office. That's Joe Biden who's been doing that, still doing it. They're going to throw a January 6th grandma in prison. Her sentencing is coming later this year. Here's more from Biden.
I mean, it's just, and think of the things he says. Look at the way he talks about minority populations, Hispanics, we're talking about them being, anyway, it's.
What did he say? What did he say? You disgusting liar. What did he say? Go ahead, give us a citation. He can't. Look at the way he talks about Hispanics. He said, what happened to Latinx? Why can't you say Latinx anymore? What did they tell you that the focus groups hated that?
Hispanics, we're talking about them being, anyway, I can't think of any other time in my lifetime in history that's occurred that you've had somebody who's had this kind of attitude.
First of all, he didn't say anything. He just sort of waved his hand around. He said, look at the way he talks about like Hispanics. Didn't cite a single thing. It's nonsense. It's just complete nonsense. But of course, the Univision guy sits there and he nods. And he's like, yes, as they mislead their audience. They're like, exactly right. You're totally right. Donald Trump. It's crazy. But that's what, and have you noticed Biden, why doesn't Biden do any other interviews? He did a Univision. I was like, where did he do, when I first saw the clip, I was like, he finally did a television interview. And the TV guys go easy on him. It's not like they'd be that hard. They could put him in front of, what's her face over at CBS? Carol King? Is that her name? Gayle King. Excuse me, Gayle King. Yeah. Oprah's friend. Gayle King. You could sit him down with Gayle King and he would just, yammer on. I think the best they did was like they put him in front of Al Roker during the Easter egg roll. That's the furthest they're willing to go to have him sit down with anybody and do an interview, except for the Univision guy where he just goes on TV and he lies and nobody stops him. Speaking of Joe Biden lying, it's unfortunate to say this, but it is true. When he's moving his lips, he's lying. He does it all the time. Yesterday, Wisconsin is announcing all this money of yours that he's giving away. I'm going to pay off your debts. Why? Exactly. To buy votes. That's the answer. He whipped out this lie again. He's done this before. Take a listen.
I, like an awful lot of people in this audience, was the first in my family to go to college and watched my dad struggle to help me get there. And
he wasn't the first in his family to go to college. In fact, that's the same lie that he told back in the late 80s during his presidential campaign. He stole that from a British politician called Neil Kinnock, the Labour Party leader, who said in his own speech that he was the first in his family to go to college. Joe Biden would steal it. And in fact, Biden, as our friend Greg Price notes today on X, he's even revealed that his grandfather played college football. I'm not even sure if this is true.
My grandfather, Finnegan Scranton, would really be proud of me right now. No, I'm not joking. He would. By the way, he's an All-American football player, John, in Santa Clara.
Oh, really? So wait, how did he play college football and then you became the first in your family to go to college? Is everything you say a lie? Is Joe Robinette Biden even your real name? We'll keep investigating. Coming up, Bradley Devlin will join us, and I'm going to tell you all about NPR and how insiders are now admitting, yeah, it's a scam.